So friends, Donald Trump's extreme right-wing Supreme Court justices didn't just give him absolute presidential immunity. No, they actually gave him absolute presidential immunity plus. What's the plus? Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, in the new Supreme Court case of Donald Trump versus the United States, and let's just pause there for a minute. Talk about an appropriate title, caption, name for a case: Donald Trump versus the United States of America. In that case, the Supreme Court, the radical right-wing bloc of the Supreme Court, in an opinion authored by Chief Justice John Roberts, the Supreme Court contradicted the Constitution. In substance, they repealed part of the Constitution. In a very real sense, they rendered the Constitution unconstitutional. But friends, don't take my word for it. Take the word of one of our nation's preeminent constitutional scholars, Akhil Reed Amar. I want to quote Professor Amar's piece in The Atlantic at some length, and then we're going to build on it a little bit, and we're going to talk about what the plus really means in absolute presidential immunity plus. Something has gone deeply wrong at the Supreme Court. Jurists, meaning judges and justices, jurists who preach fidelity to the Constitution are making decisions that flatly contradict our founding documents' text and ideals. And that article begins, forget Donald Trump, forget Joe Biden. Think instead about the Constitution. What does this document, the supreme law of our land, actually say about lawsuits against ex-presidents? Nothing remotely resembling what Chief Justice John Roberts and 5 associate justices declared in yesterday's disappointing Trump versus United States decision. The court's curious and convoluted majority opinion turns the Constitution's text and structure inside out and upside down, saying things that are flatly contradicted by the document's unambiguous letter and obvious spirit. Imagine a simple hypothetical designed to highlight the key constitutional clauses that should have been the court's starting point. In the year 2050, when Trump and Biden are presumably long gone, a fictitious person, David Dealer, commits serious drug crimes and then bribes the president, President Jane Jones, to pardon him. Is Jones acting as president in her official capacity when she pardons Dealer? Of course, she is pardoning qua president. She is pardoning as president. No one else can issue such a pardon. The Constitution expressly vests this power in the president. Quote, "The president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States." But the Constitution also contains express language that a president who takes a bribe can be impeached for bribery and then booted from office. Quote, "The president shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction in the Senate of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors." And once our hypothetical President Jones has been thus removed and is now ex-President Jones, the Constitution's plain text says that she is subject to ordinary criminal prosecution just like anyone else. Quote, "In cases of impeachment, the party, the president, convicted shall be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. Obviously, in Jones' impeachment trial in the Senate, all sorts of evidence is admissible to prove not just that she issued the pardon, but also why she did this, to prove that she had an unconstitutional motive, to prove that she pardoned Dealer because she was bribed to do so. Just as obviously, in the ensuing criminal case, all of this evidence surely must be allowed to come in. But the Trump majority opinion, written by Roberts, says otherwise, proclaiming that courts may not inquire into the president's motives. In a later footnote all about bribery, the Roberts opinion says that criminal trial courts are not allowed to admit testimony or private records of the president or his advisors, probing the official act itself. Allowing that sort of evidence would invite the jury to inspect the president's motivations for his official actions and to second-guess their propriety, close quote, quoting from Chief Justice Roberts' opinion. But such an inspection is exactly what the Constitution itself plainly calls for. An impeachment court, and later a criminal court, would have to determine whether Jones pardoned Dealer because she thought he was innocent, or because she thought he had already suffered enough, or because he put money in her pocket for the very purpose of procuring the pardon. The smoking gun may well be in Jones' diary, her private records, or in a recorded Oval Office conversation with Jones' advisors, as was the case in the Watergate scandal. Essentially, the court in Trump versus United States is declaring the Constitution itself unconstitutional. Instead of properly starting with the Constitution's text and structure, the court has ended up repealing them. So friends, in their opinion, in Trump versus United States, the Supreme Court justices not only contradict the express language of the Constitution, but they declare that parts of the Constitution are unconstitutional. That makes no damn sense. It's illogical. And, it's more than just an abuse of judicial discretion. It does real violence to our system of government, to our Constitution, and ultimately to our democracy. In a very real sense, it's a recipe, a blueprint to convert America into a banana republic. But let's build on the hypothetical a bit. So the opinion talks about, core constitutional powers of the president, and they cannot be questioned. They can't be investigated. You can't look behind, for example, a presidential pardon. That's a core constitutional power. They call it an exclusive and preclusive power of the president. They think if they put enough fancy words on there, they might distract us from what's really going on. Lawlessness by a criminal president as sanctioned and excused and thereby encouraged by a runaway Supreme Court. But they call the pardon power a core constitutional power that can't be investigated, can't be questioned. If it's a product of the president, having people pay for pardons, so be it. Nothing we can do about it, nothing we will let law enforcement, the Department of Justice, or the courts do about it, which, again, is a recipe to sort of stampede us into banana republic territory. But that's one of the president's core constitutional powers. Another one, the Supreme Court tells us, is because the president is the chief law enforcement officer, right, atop all federal law enforcement, he has the authority, unfettered, can't be questioned, can't be investigated, can't look behind it, unfettered authority to tell his Department of Justice to prosecute whomever. Another core constitutional power, nothing you can do about it. The president can commit all the crimes he wants and he can't be touched. But it gets worse because here's the plus in the absolute presidential immunity plus scenario. Put these two core constitutional powers together, the pardon power and the power as chief executive to instruct your Department of Justice to prosecute anybody that you, a corrupt president, wants prosecuted. That gives a president, Donald Trump, in the horrific event he gets reelected, and he won't, we'll talk about that in a minute, it gives him the power, the ability, with impunity and immunity, to say to his next corrupt attorney general that he appoints, I'm ordering you to round up my enemies and detain them without charges, without due process, without evidence. They're my enemies, and I have absolute power. Detain them. And by the way, you all, members of the Department of Justice, are probably violating the law when you do it, when you follow my unlawful command, my command directing you to break the law. But don't worry, I've got another core presidential power that can take care of that, the pardon power. So I hereby pardon you for all of the crimes you have committed at my direction, and now I can't be prosecuted because I have absolute presidential immunity, and you can't be prosecuted because I've exercised that constitutional core power to pardon y'all. And nobody can look behind a pardon that a president grants. That's absolute presidential immunity plus. He gets to recruit his whole, corrupt core of co-conspirators to commit the crimes for which he then pardons them. That's what the Supreme Court has sanctioned, enabled, endorsed, and thereby encouraged. It's a blueprint that only a dictator could love, or an autocrat, or a despot. A guy like Donald Trump, who promised us he would be a dictator on day one. His words. And this cannot stand. I've said before, and I've heard a number of constitutional scholars predict, this Supreme Court decision will ultimately go the way of Dred Scott or Korematsu or Plessy versus Ferguson, some of the darkest, most horrific Supreme Court rulings in our nation's history. But the problem is, it took decades for those cases to be reversed. We don't have decades. We've got months. But here's what I'm going to end this video with, and probably every video from now until Election Day. I want to congratulate the American people because each one of you has been selected to serve on the final Trump jury between now and Election Day, November 5th, because it looks like none of Trump's other criminal cases. He has 4 active criminal cases, 3 pending trial, 1 in which he's already been convicted for trying to steal the 2016 presidential election. You all are now the jurors. You've been selected. You've been chosen. You are fit to serve. You are an acceptable jury for this task, for this mission. And it is to go to the polls on November 5th and vote guilty. Donald Trump is guilty. Vote against Donald Trump. You, the jury, at this point, seem to be the only thing standing between Donald Trump and dictatorship. And I know you're up to the task. I know we are up to the task. We will vote guilty on November 5th. And we will save American democracy. Because justice matters. Friends, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.